Hello, hello. If you're here with me, let me know that you're joining, where you're joining from. I'm going to put that in the chat. Somebody gave me a thumbs up, so I know that you can hear me. Welcome, welcome. I'm glad you're here. We are talking today about something that I think a lot of us can get confused, especially if we were raised to be nice and to be accommodating and to make sure that everybody was happy and to put other people first. And then we grew up into these adults who that became the behavior, that became the habits that we had in order to feel accepted and to feel loved and wanted and valued, right? Is to behave in these ways because they worked for us when we were young. And I'm going to jump right into it. When we were young, basically we needed to survive, right? And not that we don't need to survive now, but we did things when we were young to survive, to get approval and acceptance from our caretakers, especially if we didn't automatically if it wasn't given freely, if we didn't feel it intuitively, we would seek out then and behave in certain ways to get their acceptance and to get approval and love, because that is the way that then we ultimately survived. Because when we were young, we we couldn't take care of ourselves. We had to rely on someone to take care of us, whether that was our parents or people that we lived with, even teachers and older people that maybe we looked up to. So and that is a very normal thing. Our DNA has not changed much from when we were caveman, cavewoman days, and we had to survive. And so acceptance into the tribe, acceptance into our community is what kept us safe and alive. But from this, in modern day world, what we develop are these coping mechanisms, are these ways of behaving that we think are what is keeping us safe. And so as adults, then we continue because they become habits in the subconscious mind. They just become habits to behave that way. And so we end up behaving in ways that are not conducive to long term, deep relationships. And they're not conducive to our own well being. They're not helpful for us being our own agents, if you will. So I have 5 things that we if you were taught to be nice, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. If you were taught that to put other people first, these 5 behaviors might be things that you do that you don't realize you're doing, but they're actually a little bit manipulative. Um, and again, you didn't do this on purpose. You were trained, you were taught to be this way, and then it just became habitual. I would love for someone to put in the chat, like, were you taught to put other people first, and so you learned these ways to be accepted or to feel accepted and to be approved of? Uh, yeah, I would love for you to put in the chat, if this resonates with you. So, one of the things that I realized that I hated thinking about being called was selfish. And that's where a lot of this stems from, is because we don't want to be perceived in a certain light, then do things we behave in ways in order to not be perceived that way, to not be judged from other people as being selfish or rude or whatever word, that you have tried to avoid being. And so then we like morph ourselves and we start becoming someone really that we're not in order to avoid being disapproved of or rejected or ridiculed or belittled, right? And we start behaving in these ways as adults. So being called selfish was one of the things that I wanted to avoid. And again, this thinking that we're going to appear as being selfish by doing something for ourselves, by speaking up for ourselves, by um, saying no, by really, it encompasses a lot that we think because of the way we were taught, we think it's selfish. If I don't put them first, if I don't think of their needs first, if I don't say yes all the time, then I was taught that that is being selfish. So we end up morphing ourselves into whoever we think the other person wants us to be, and however we think we need to be in order to appear as not the thing we don't want to appear as, such as selfish or um what's another, like, we don't want to appear as too proud or too haughty or too, and usually it's too anything, right? We don't want to be appear as better than, or we just we grow up fearing this judgment, which causes us then to morph ourselves into something that authentically isn't who we truly are at our core. So I want to go through these 5 behaviors that we do that we think we're being nice, but are actually manipulative. And again, we were conditioned, these are conditioned ways of thinking that other people's feelings matter more than mine. That, again, if you don't have anything nice to say, I don't know how many times I heard that as a young child. If you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say anything at all. And it taught me not to speak up for myself, right? And to think that other people were always the authority in my life, and to not trust my gut. And I'm releasing a video later today in a few hours that is talking about learning how to trust your gut instincts, your intuition, how we were taught not to, and how to learn to trust it again as an adult. And my huge turning point in that had to do with my now ex-husband um, calling me out on something that I said to him, where I actually was, for once, finally trusting my gut. And so you can go listen to that video. If you're not subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe so that you get alerted when that video releases. Again, it will release in a few hours this afternoon. And you can go see what really turned this around for me to start trusting myself completely, implicitly, without relying on that external validation or approval from someone else. But again, that's what we were taught to get, is approval from other people, that the decisions I'm making, that what I think and feel and want and need, we look outside of ourselves to to have someone else tell us that that's okay to feel that way. And we don't need to do that. But again, it's just conditioning. It's what we were taught. It's not your fault if this is a behavior or a coping mechanism that you use now. It has just become a habit. So what are the 5 things that we do that maybe you don't even realize that you're doing, that are you think you're being nice, but that are actually manipulative? One is to be easygoing, to be go with the flow. Now, how is that being manipulative, right? You think, okay, I'm just going to go with the flow. I'm going to let other people decide. I'm going to let them um, make the decisions, and it doesn't matter to me, right? How is that manipulative? Well, first, you are hiding the real you. So no one ever gets to know what you like or want or desire or need, because you're always just going with the flow. This can cause resentment in other people toward you and in yourself, because you're never getting your needs met. But the thing is, you're not asking for them, right? Because you're just easy, go with the flow. I don't have any needs. I don't I don't express my needs. That's what going with the flow is. Adrian said, "Yes, I question my motivation for needing to be accepted and approved of." Questioning, being aware of it first is the first key, right? If we don't even know that we're doing it, we can't do anything about it. But being aware of it is the first step. And so I applaud you for questioning it. And I'm gonna give you a little bit at the end of this live on what you can do to start breaking away from that. So we're easygoing, we're go with the flow. We let people walk all over us. And again, that ends up ultimately creating resentment. And we think it's their fault, but we're allowing it to happen. That's manipulative. And again, there is no blame here, because this is how we were taught. This is how we were taught to be and behave. So there's no blaming, there's no shame about this. It's all about awareness and realizing what what the habits are that you're actually living out, and how those, like Adrian said, you know, if we're needing to be accepted and approved of, how is that impacting my life? What is that keeping me from doing or being? What decisions am I not making because I'm afraid someone won't accept or approve of me if I make that decision? So this easygoing and go with the flow, this causes us to suppress our true reactions in order to avoid that rejection. Again, it's manipulative in the way that we end up hiding the true us, by being easygoing and go with the flow. That is, I I can pretty confidently say that there is no person living who doesn't have some need or desire or preference about something, right? But again, we were trained to just go with the flow and not make any waves, right? Not rock the boat. And we think that by speaking what we need, that that would be upsetting the apple cart, that that would be rocking the boat. And at first, if you haven't spoken your needs for years and years and years, which most of us haven't, who were taught, right, to put other people first, then the other person may react in a way that is not ultimately the way you want them to react, right? They might be shocked, they might be surprised, they might be act hurt, right? But you speaking up for what you want and need and desire, what it could be as simple as, what restaurant do you want to go to, right? I've had clients who have shared that they won't pick the restaurant. And this was me. I am not pointing the finger at anyone. I used to do this too. They won't pick the restaurant because what if they pick the wrong place? Right? What if the person doesn't like it and then they feel blamed or like they did something wrong? But we have to start letting other people handle their emotions, their reactions, their hurt, all of that, and not take that on ourselves. And that's what we do a lot of times when we want to be easygoing and go with the flow is we take on their emotions and their feelings and we're trying to make them comfortable. The second thing that we do is, which this is a biggie for me, we apologize for things we don't do wrong. Saying sorry to appear kind or to avoid disapproval, we think this is being nice. We think it's being kind. We take on the blame to control again how others see us, like Adrian said, needing to be accepted and approved of, right? So we take on the blame to control that outcome. And I want to do a video on this, on my big aha about how I discovered I never thought I was controlling because I put everybody else's needs first, right? But that is actually a very, very controlling behavior. And I will do a live on that in the future to talk about how I had this huge aha. I'm making a note for myself. How I had this huge aha about how I was actually controlling other people and the outcome of things by not speaking up and telling my truth. So when we over apologize and take the blame that isn't ours to take, we're being manipulative because, again, we're trying to shape their perception of us by diminishing ourselves, by apologizing, by taking a step lower than that pedestal that we're putting the other person on. We are ultimately diminishing who we are, um, in our own eyes, in our subconscious without knowing it, but to them so that we can appear, we can be perceived as nice and not selfish, right? A lot of this goes back to not wanting to appear selfish. So again, we say sorry when we didn't do anything wrong to avoid disapproval and to avoid being blamed for things. So we just take on, we just, what's the word? We like preemptively take on the blame for things. Even something as simple as and as silly as someone bumping you with their shopping cart in the grocery store. And what do? We turn and say sorry, right? Oh, my battery is low on my other laptop. Hold, please. I'm getting everything discombobulated here. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay, there we go. I'm back. Okay, what's the third thing that we do that we think is nice? We say yes when we mean no. How many times do you do that? And think that you're being nice, think that you're, you know, that you're meeting their expectations, that you're being kind and giving and caring by saying nice, agreeing to plans or favors that you don't want to do. But then what happens when we do that and we overextend ourselves? How do we show up? We show up resentful or bitter or begrudgingly, or maybe we don't show up at all. Maybe we ghost them. And right, because we're just so exhausted when this thing that we said yes to comes up, we just can't perform, right? This is what leads to burnout, is saying yes to way too many things. If you have a comment, I would love for you to share in the comments. Do you do this? Do you say yes and then you're exhausted and you're mad at yourself for saying yes again, right? This is manipulation. Even agreeing to being intimate with your partner when you're not feeling it, when you're maybe there's something that you're holding on to that you haven't spoken up about, that you're hurt about, and so you're building that resentment inside, right? Um, so when you're not emotionally okay, saying yes to things such as being intimate is not kind. It's not nice. It's actually manipulative because you want to stay in their good graces, right? You want to stay in you want to be perceived in a certain way by them. And ultimately, this goes back to, again, it goes back to being rejected because, again, in caveman, cavewoman days, and really ultimately not that long ago, 100 years ago, right? The woman, for the most part, a lot of times relied on the man and relied on the safety of the tribe, is maybe the way I should put it. Not necessarily the man, but the safety of the tribe that they were in. And so we we have this in our DNA where that is a behavior that we know as what keeps us safe, is to not be rejected, because rejected a long time ago could mean death, right? Could mean that you couldn't survive. But in modern day, now, right, we can be rejected by someone and we have our own agency, so we can take care of ourselves. So we say yes to avoid looking selfish, hoping for approval in return, and that is manipulative. The fourth thing that we do is hinting about things instead of saying what we need, expecting others to get the message, using indirect communication when you're hurt. Like I said, not speaking up. And then that builds up and becomes resentment. And I say that it's like being emotionally constipated, right? And when you're constipated, what's happening in your body? You're building up toxins, you're building up dis-ease in the body when you're constipated. And the same thing happens when you suppress your emotions. So when we hint about what we need instead of just stating it clearly, we're being passive aggressive and we're hoping that they just figure out what we need. And this is manipulative. It's attempting to influence their behavior and their perception of us without honest communication. The fifth thing that we do is we test people instead of telling them the truth. So we say, "I'm fine," when we're actually not, hoping that they'll figure it out. And we actually test, not, again, it's not consciously, we're doing it unconsciously. We test how they feel about us. We make people guess our feelings. And this is manipulative instead of and then we can become resentful toward them when they don't guess correctly, right? And we blame it on them that they didn't guess correctly, that they didn't that they didn't anticipate my needs when I didn't communicate them to begin with. So we make people guess our feelings and what we need and want, and we drop emotional cues instead of being just outright open. I remember a time, and I got called out on it with my therapist at the time. My my second husband, we were toward the end of our marriage, and I didn't necessarily realize it, but things were going downhill. We'd been married 17 years. And we were going to therapy, and one day I was doing laundry, and he was really good at doing housework and really, pitching in. It wasn't about that. But he asked me as I'm folding clothes if I needed help. And I lost it on him. And I realize now that this was me testing him. Over the years, I had been testing him because I hadn't been speaking my truth, and I thought he should just know to jump in and help, right? Why do you need to ask me if I wanted help? And I was making him guess, and I was building up resentment because he wasn't guessing right about what I needed or wanted. And it was I see it now. It was a game, but it came from my subconscious, right? Where I didn't understand. I didn't know to speak my truth. I didn't know that it would be safe. I didn't know that I wouldn't be rejected if I didn't speak my truth. I mean, if I did speak my truth. So, but that's not the ultimate goal about this is, will I be rejected or not when I speak my truth? The ultimate goal is to speak our truth so that we can be in deep relationship with the other person. Because without us speaking our truth, the other person doesn't know the real me. They can't guess what my truth is. And if I don't ever speak it, then that is being manipulative by me expecting them to know who I am and to understand what I need or want. But because I was I was basically conditioned to fear rejection, to seek approval and to avoid disapproval, right? I just grew into this habit of not speaking my truth. So this includes, again, saying, I'm fine when you're not, making people guess your feelings, dropping emotional clues instead of being open and honest. And again, it's manipulative in the way that we're testing them. How much do they really care while we're hiding the truth? And this breaks connection. So, what can we do about all of this? Um, Again, awareness, as I said at the beginning of this live, awareness is the first clue. And what we can do is to become more aware of how we have these behaviors that we think are being nice, but are actually being manipulative, how we can become aware of those. Because a lot of times, like Adrienne said earlier in the chat, she said she questions her motivation for needing to be accepted and approved of. And so, what you can do to help you figure out what am I doing that is actually more manipulative than it is being kind is to make a list. You can call it an awareness list, right? Write 10 things that you see yourself doing to gain approval. Do you say yes when you really want to say no? Do you always go with the flow? Do you not state clearly what you need? Are you passive aggressive in your communication? Do you say I'm fine? Things like that. Those are all approval seeking mechanisms. And again, there's no blame here, right? These are all things we learn to do in order to be accepted and approved of when we were young, but they became habits that we're living into today. So 10 things you do to gain approval. And this isn't for shame, it's for visibility so that you can see it and that you can figure out how do I need to adjust to stop doing this behavior? So we want to pull these behaviors out of the blind spot because that's where a lot of them are. They're in our blind spot. We don't even recognize that they're there. The second thing that you can do to stop thinking that you're being nice and to stop this manipulative behavior of always putting other people first. And if you're just joining, I invite you to go back and watch the beginning of this live where I talked about how we are raised to think that we're being nice, and how we actually, a lot of these behaviors that then we developed and took into adulthood are actually quite manipulative. So the second thing you can do, it's a simple but not so easy step, is to learn how to say no easier, right? Use softer, clearer alternatives instead of being this passive aggressive, or instead of being indirect in your communication. And I have a link down in the description of 20 ways to say no without feeling guilty. You can grab that link. It's free. It gives you a bunch of different scenarios and different wording. I also recently released a video, and I'll put the link to it, I think it's here, um, on 5 exact phrases you can use to basically turn someone down, or to say no in a softer way without coming right out and saying no. Because our subconscious thinks that saying no is not safe. Again, it goes back to caveman, cavewoman days. If we said no, we had the idea that we might be rejected, which means that we might not survive. And so we learned, the subconscious learned that no doesn't feel safe, and it can't act on its own. So it acts on and helps and drives you to act on what is predictable and known, and um and say ultimately safe, right? The subconscious is always behaving, or it is programmed in the way to keep you safe, and so it will do whatever it needs to do, and that it learned to avoid saying no in order to stay safe, to be approved of, to be not rejected. So you can grab that resource again. It's linked here, or it was linked here. Maybe I can link it twice. I don't know. And I will also link at the end of this live, which we are ending here shortly. Um, So the link for 20 ways to say no is in the description. It's also here. And at the end of this live, I will link the video of the 5 phrases that you can use to say no without guilt. They're exact phrases to use when you want to say no, but you're not ready to say an outright no. So go grab that. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time. And if you're listening to the replay, I appreciate you listening. If you have comments, I would love for you to comment. I go live every Sunday. So bring your coffee, grab your coffee, join me next Sunday at 10:10 Central Time. And I would love to have you here and share in the comments, what we're talking about. So have a great day, everyone, and I will see you in the next live or the next video.